The Carboniferous period occurred from around 360 million years ago to 300 million years ago during the late Paleozoic era. During this time, organisms evolved, landforms grew, and climates changed. When was the Carboniferous period? The Carboniferous period comes after the Cambrian, Ordovician, Silurian, and Devonian periods, and comes before the Permian period. The Carboniferous period is split into two separate periods. The Mississippian period, also known as the early Carboniferous period, occurred from 360 to 320 million years ago. Seas covered parts of the continent during the Mississippian period, so most of the rocks found from that time period were marine limestone. The Pennsylvanian period, also known as the late Carboniferous period, occurred from 320 to 300 million years ago. Swamp forests and terrestrial habitats became more common during the Pennsylvanian, so most of the rock sediment was composed of sandstone and shale. What was the climate and geography like during the Carboniferous period? During the early Carboniferous period, Gondwana was formed. Throughout the Carboniferous period, the continents continued to move, and eventually Pangaea was formed during the late Carboniferous period. This resulted in a large portion of this supercontinent, mainly towards the South Pole, being covered in glaciers. But the temperate swamp regions were not affected by the glaciers. During the Carboniferous period, much of Earth was very warm and humid, around 68 degrees Fahrenheit, especially around the equator, therefore covered in thick swamps. Also referred to as coal forests, as they are a large source of today's coal. But around 305 million years ago, the rainforest collapsed as the climate became much cooler and arid, most likely as a result of intense glaciation and a drop in sea level of about 330 feet. What was terrestrial life like during the Carboniferous period? Invertebrates. Invertebrates grew much larger than today because oxygen concentrations peaked at 35% during the late Carboniferous period. Griffin flies, related to the modern dragonfly, roam the earth with a wingspan of 2 feet. Arthropleura, related to the modern centipede, grew to 8 feet long. These insects dominated the skies and swamps during the late Carboniferous. Plants. During the early Carboniferous period, land plants were very similar to those around during the late Devonian, but new plant species also emerged. Horsetails, club mosses, and ferns continued to dominate through this period. Cycads, seed ferns, and conifers appeared during this time period. Amphibians. The very first tetrapods of the late Devonian period evolved from lobe-finned fish, lost their internal gills, and were evolving towards becoming true amphibians. Life on land was well established by the Carboniferous period. Amphibians dominated during this time period as they were able to lay their eggs in water and keep their skin moist. But this meant they couldn't venture too far onto dry land. Amphibians dominated the land when the climate was humid and hot. But after the rainforest collapsed, reptiles adapted well to the dry environment and continued to diversify. Reptiles. The first appearance of amniotes, synapsids, and reptiles occurred during the late Carboniferous. Lizards, snakes, and crocodile-like organisms became dominant land vertebrates. Tetrapods evolved, becoming pentadactylous, meaning they have digits on hands, feet, and sometimes wings. One of the earliest reptiles, Hylonomus, appeared roughly 315 million years ago. Towards the end of the Carboniferous period, reptiles migrated inwards towards the center of Pangaea. The Carboniferous period contained immense diversity and change in the evolution of life on Earth. During this period, there was the rise of invertebrates and the establishment of life on land. Amphibians dominated the land when the climate was humid and hot, and reptiles became dominant organisms as the climate became cold and dry.